I think I now have got this keyboard mostly figured out as far as how to get it working properly. I was kind of puzzling over it because I think that this is the first one of these that I've worked on, this particular keyboard. We also did a 1900 one time, but I think its keyboard didn't have any trouble at all, so we might have just had to clean the contacts. But this one, I'm going to put all the new buttons on here. And when I got the buttons on, first of all, I had to grind down the ends of these switch actuators here a little bit with the Dremel tool, because the new buttons were a little bit shallower inside somehow, and the buttons are all getting mashed when the switch bank was put back on. So then I got that all done, and I got this put back together. But I was getting problems, several different problems. One was that the buttons could not be pushed in, and another one was that once the buttons were pushed in, they wouldn't latch and wouldn't reliably complete the circuit on with the switches here. And the way that this disassembles is, first you got to remove this back piece. And there are 4 screws at the bottom, one here that hooks up to this ground lug, one here, and one under there. Those got to come off, and those go on these little brass spacers. And then there's 2 nuts that go on here. And these nuts are designed with 2 nuts on each thing so that you can adjust the amount of tension. And I've learned that that is critical as far as the adjustments to making it work correctly. Because when I first put it all back together, I didn't tighten up these nuts, and everything was jamming because the switch banks were receiving an unequal amount of force from this thing, and the force applied here wasn't being counterbalanced by these brackets here. And it's not a case of just cinching it down as tight as you can, because if you cinch it down too tight, if you screw this inner nut forward too much, it won't work properly. You got to have just the right amount of tension. Then there's also this linkage here which connects the 2 switch banks and which actuates this little cam here, which goes back to a switch back here. And this is able to be loosened and moved, and so is this. And you got to adjust it so that when the latch bar solenoid is activated, the buttons will latch down to complete the right-end cycle and then be able to release. So now, after a lot of experimentation over the past week or so, today I was able to come in here and just really adjust it. And that's such a good feeling, because it's just life is always a learning process. No matter how many of these jukeboxes you've worked on in your life, you know the concepts of what has to be done, but each one has its own little peculiarities, and until you work on that particular model, you just sometimes have to puzzle through things to really become proficient at it. So now I'm going to simulate the latch bar solenoid being activated, and I'm going to push in a button here. It's a little hard to hold the camera and push the buttons, but you'll notice that the button is latched down. Now we should be able to, this is not going to look right, but should be able to latch in a letter button. So now the buttons are latched down, and the right-end cycle, if this was hooked up to the jukebox, the right-end cycle would have gone on. And in this particular machine, there's a solenoid for each pin, so there's no wait for the right-end motor like on the later models. But let's say the right-end is completed and I release it. Now the buttons pop up, and all the buttons here can be pushed in. That was another problem. The buttons were jamming upon being pushed in. So I'm going to hook it back up to the jukebox. Now that I've learned more about how the adjustments all work, it should perform reliably actually in the machine.